Were the Middle Ages really just about knights in shining armor and damsels in distress? Or were there secret whispers, stolen glances, and loves so forbidden their true stories have been buried for centuries? From the grand courts of kings to the shadows of religious institutions, medieval life was full of hidden passions. But some of these passionate stories come with a twist. We know someone was there. We feel the weight of their absence, but their identity remains a complete, baffling mystery. For centuries, from the 1100s to the 1400s, who were the shadowy figures who captured heart-sparked scandals and left behind only tantalizing clues? Who were these hidden lovers who shaped history without ever being fully named? Number 1. The anonymous lover of Pope Boniface VIII. The year is 1303. The setting is Anagni, a small town near Rome. Pope Boniface VIII, a man of immense power, intelligence, and ambition, finds himself at the center of a storm. He is locked in a fierce dispute with King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. This conflict isn't just about politics. It's a clash of titans over the very nature of spiritual and temporal authority. Boniface had issued the papal bull, Unam Sanctum, declaring the Pope's supreme authority over all earthly rulers, a statement that deeply offended the powerful French king. Philip the Fair was not one to back down. He was a master of political maneuvering and propaganda. Unable to defeat Boniface through conventional warfare, he resorted to a vicious campaign of character assassination. He accused the Pope of every imaginable sin: heresy, simony, sorcery, idolatry, even the murder of his predecessor. Among these damning accusations, buried within the long lists of alleged moral failings, were whispers of Boniface's private life. Church documents and chronicles from this tumultuous period are filled with the accusations leveled against Boniface. They speak of his alleged impiety, his luxurious lifestyle, and his disregard for priestly celibacy. Specifically, some of these accusations claim that Boniface, despite his sacred vows as a cleric and ultimately as pope, maintained relationships with women. These were not just vague rumors. Some of the accusations were quite specific in their condemnation of his moral conduct, though never naming specific individuals. The charges laid against Boniface during the Council of Paris in 1303 and later during the posthumous trial at Avignon in 1311 are particularly revealing. Witnesses, many of them coerced or politically motivated, testified about the Pope's various transgressions. Among these were testimonies that implied or directly stated that Boniface engaged in sexual relations, which for a cleric, and especially a pope, was a grave sin. The very act of having a mistress, or multiple mistresses, was a direct violation of canon law and a massive blow to the moral authority of the papacy. Yet, despite the intensity of the accusations and the numerous witnesses brought forward by Philip IV's agents, the specific identities of these alleged lovers are never clearly stated in the surviving records. The documents refer to certain women, or concubines, without providing names, places, or dates that would allow historians to identify them. This omission is not accidental. In the highly charged political climate of the early 14th century, naming a woman in such a scandal could have had devastating consequences for her and her family. Her reputation would be ruined, and she could face severe punishment from both secular and ecclesiastical authorities. Thus, anonymity became a shield, whether offered by the accusers to avoid legal complications, or by the women themselves to escape retribution. The motivations for these accusations are clear. Philip IV sought to discredit Boniface entirely, to paint him as a corrupt and immoral figure, unfit for the papacy. The consistent inclusion of accusations about his private life, even if exaggerated or entirely fabricated, suggests a general perception, or at least a vulnerability, that Philip's propagandists were keen to exploit. The lack of specific names, however, leaves a profound historical void. Who were these women? Were they noble ladies drawn into a perilous affair with one of the most powerful men in Christendom? Were they women of lesser status, perhaps even servants, whose presence in the papal household went largely unrecorded. Except in whispers and accusations, the historical records offer no definitive answers. They were simply the women. Their lives, their stories, their very existence beyond the allegations remain shrouded in the political fog of a papal conflict. They are mentioned only as part of a damning indictment, their individual identities deemed irrelevant compared to the moral ruin they were meant to signify for the Pope. The accusations against Boniface VIII, particularly those concerning his sexual conduct, underscore the dangerous tightrope walk of power and personal life in the medieval papacy. Any deviation from strict celibacy could be weaponized by political enemies. The identities of these alleged lovers, if they existed, were erased from the historical narrative, not by accident, but perhaps by deliberate suppression to protect themselves, or because their identities were simply not important to those making the accusations. The scandal itself became the focus, not the people involved. The mystery of these women, existing only as unnamed shadows in the most explosive papal trial of the medieval era, continues to intrigue, historians leaving us to wonder about the hidden lives caught in the crossfire of power. Number 2. The secret lover of Joan of Kent. Joan of Kent, often called the Fair Maid of Kent, was a woman whose life was nothing short of extraordinary and highly controversial, even for a royal princess in the turbulent 14th century. Born around 1328, she was the daughter of Edmund of Woodstock, Earl of Kent, who was King Edward I's younger son. This made her King Edward III's first cousin. Her beauty was legendary, earning her the epithet Fair Maid. But her life was also marked by scandalous choices that continually put her at the center of political intrigue and social upheaval. Before she eventually married Edward the Black Prince, England's celebrated warrior and heir to the throne, Joan had a convoluted and legally challenging romantic history. Her first marriage was particularly baffling. Around 1340, when she was barely a teenager, she secretly married Thomas Holland, a relatively obscure knight who was serving with her family in the English forces abroad. This marriage was performed without the knowledge or consent of her guardians, or the king, a grave offense for someone of her rank. The secret marriage remained hidden for several years. During this period, while Thomas Holland was away fighting in the 100 Years' War, Joan's family arranged another marriage for her, this time to William Montague, Earl of Salisbury. This union was grand and public, celebrated with royal approval. For 2 years, Joan lived as the Countess of Salisbury. However, when Thomas Holland returned from the wars, he revealed their secret marriage, claiming Joan as his rightful wife. This revelation triggered a sensational legal battle that rocked the English court. The case was brought before the Pope, Clement VI, for judgment. After extensive arguments and testimonies, the Pope ultimately ruled in 1349 that Joan's marriage to Thomas Holland was valid, annulling her union with William Montague. This outcome was a huge scandal, reflecting poorly on all involved, especially given Joan's royal connections. She subsequently lived as Thomas Holland's wife, bearing him 4 children. But here's where the mystery deepens. Joan's life was constantly under scrutiny, and her reputation, despite her beauty, was often tarnished by the whispers of the court. Even after her validated marriage to Thomas Holland, and certainly before her eventual marriage to the Black Prince in 1361, there are subtle hints and allusions in some medieval chronicles to a life not entirely confined to conventional boundaries. These hints suggest that Joan, a woman of independent spirit and undeniable allure, might have had other relationships, perhaps even another secret lover whose identity was carefully guarded and suppressed by the powerful families involved, or simply lost to history. The very nature of medieval court chronicles often meant that scandalous details, particularly those involving high-ranking women, were either entirely omitted, veiled in euphemism, or vaguely alluded to without naming names. The intent was to protect the dignity of noble families and the monarchy. The fact that her first marriage was secret and only revealed years later opens up the possibility that other, less formal, or less acknowledged relationships might have been kept even more thoroughly hidden. A woman of Joan's status, especially one who had already caused one public scandal, would have been under immense pressure to conform. Any further indiscretion, especially an unapproved romantic liaison, could have led to disinheritance, imprisonment, or even more severe consequences. Political landscape was fraught with peril, and a queen or a princess's legitimacy and reputation were paramount. Therefore, if such a relationship existed, its details would have been meticulously erased or never recorded in the first place, leaving only the faintest impression in the historical consciousness. Historians today pore over fragmented court records, personal letters, though few survive from Joan herself, and monastic chronicles searching for any additional clues. The general picture of Joan of Kent that emerges is one of a passionate, strong-willed woman who navigated a treacherous political and social environment. Her beauty and charisma were undeniable, and it is entirely plausible that she attracted many admirers and that some of these attractions might have blossomed into secret affairs that never saw the light of day. In formal records, the unknown lover of Joan of Kent remains a phantom, a suggestion of a deeper, more complex private life that was carefully hidden from public view. Was there another knight, another noble, or perhaps even someone less prominent, who captured her heart before or during her tumultuous journey to becoming the Princess of Wales? The historical silence is deafening, leaving us only to wonder about the hidden passions of a woman who defied conventions and lived a life of extraordinary romantic drama. Number 3. The anonymous mistress of Geoffrey Plantagenet, Count of Anjou. Geoffrey Plantagenet, Count of Anjou, Duke of Normandy, and father of King Henry II of England, was a pivotal figure in the 12th century. His marriage to Empress Matilda, daughter of King Henry I of England, was a strategic alliance meant to secure the English throne for their descendants. Matilda, a powerful and fiercely intelligent woman, was herself a claimant to the English crown. Their union ultimately led to the establishment of the Plantagenet dynasty in England, one of the most famous royal houses in history. Born in 1113, Geoffrey was a man of considerable military skill and political acumen, known for his handsome appearance, earning him the nickname, the Fair. He was also known for his rather colorful private life. Before his marriage to Matilda in 1128, when he was just 15 years old and she was 26, Geoffrey had already embarked on a path that would produce illegitimate children. Indeed, his first known child, Hamelin, was born out of wedlock, likely in 1129, a year after his marriage to Empress Matilda. This means that Hamelin's mother was a woman with whom Geoffrey had a relationship either very shortly before his marriage to the Empress, or perhaps even in the very early stages of their union, before they had legitimate children together. The existence of Hamelin is confirmed by numerous historical records. Hamelin later became a prominent figure in his own right, marrying Isabel de Warenne, the wealthy heiress of the Earl of Surrey. He was a loyal half-brother to King Henry II and a significant landholder in England. Despite Hamelin's established place in the historical narrative and his clear paternity as Geoffrey's son, the identity of his mother remains entirely unknown in the surviving chronicles, charters, and royal records of the time. She is simply an anonymous figure, a biological mother whose name, lineage, and personal story have been completely erased from history. Why would such an important detail be missing? In the medieval period, the identity of a child's mother was crucial, especially for noble or royal offspring, as it determined their lineage, legitimacy, and social standing. While illegitimate children were common, particularly among royalty and nobility, the mothers of these children were often recorded, even if they were not formally acknowledged as wives. Sometimes they were named, sometimes they were referred to by their first name or by their place of origin. But in the case of Hamelin's mother, There is nothing, no name, no hint of her background, no mention of the circumstances of their relationship. The silence is striking. It suggests a deliberate suppression of her identity. Perhaps she was a woman of much lower social standing, whose name was deemed unworthy of recording in official documents, alongside the illustrious Angevin. Or perhaps the relationship was particularly scandalous, even for the time, and her identity was deliberately suppressed to avoid bringing further disrepute to Geoffrey, especially as he was about to marry the powerful and legitimate heir to the English throne. The marriage to Empress Matilda was too important for any premarital complications to be widely publicized or formally acknowledged. Consider the social environment of the 12th century. Powerful men like Geoffrey Plantagenet often engaged in relationships outside of marriage. While the church condemned such behavior, it was a pervasive reality. The women involved, however, bore the brunt of social judgment and potential ostracism. If a relationship was secret, or if the woman was of a vulnerable position, her name might have been omitted to protect her from social ruin, or simply because chroniclers did not deem her important enough to record. Historians who have studied Geoffrey Plantagenet's life and the origins of the Plantagenet dynasty note this glaring omission. They can trace the lineage of Hamlin, but the woman who bore him remains a ghost. Her very existence is confirmed only by the presence of her son. We know she lived, she loved, and she gave birth to a child who would become a significant player in English history. But she herself remains a nameless void in the historical record. The identity of Geoffrey Plantagenet's anonymous mistress is a profound mystery. She is a foundational figure in the story of the Plantagenets. Yet we know nothing about her. Her story, her voice, her aspirations, and her very name are lost to the mists of time, leaving us to wonder about the hidden lives of women who played a crucial, albeit unacknowledged, role in shaping the course of medieval history. Number 4. One of Henry I's many unnamed mistresses. King Henry I of England, youngest son of William the Conqueror, reigned from 1100 to 1135. He was a formidable ruler, known for his administrative reforms, his cunning political strategies, and his determination to secure his dynasty. He was also famously, or perhaps infamously, known for his prolific number of illegitimate children. While he had only 2 legitimate children who survived to adulthood, a son, William Adelin, and a daughter, Empress Matilda. He fathered at least 20 and possibly as many as 25 illegitimate children. This extraordinary number of offspring suggests a truly remarkable string of relationships outside of his 2 marriages. Henry's first wife was Matilda of Scotland, a woman of royal Anglo-Saxon lineage, whom he married to legitimize his rule in the eyes of his English subjects. After her death, he married Adeliza of Louvain, but this marriage produced no surviving children. The vast majority of his children were born out of wedlock, a testament to his active personal life. The existence of these illegitimate children is well documented in various medieval chronicles and administrative records. Many of them were acknowledged by Henry, receiving lands, titles, or advantageous marriages into noble families. For example, Robert, Earl of Gloucester, one of Henry's most prominent illegitimate sons, played a crucial role in the civil war known as the Anarchy, fighting fiercely on behalf of his half-sister, Empress Matilda. Other children, such as Sibylla, who became Queen of Scotland, or Matilda, who married the Count of Perche, also left their mark on history. However, while the names and sometimes the fates of these illegitimate children are known, the identities of their mothers are, for the most part, completely shrouded in mystery. Of the more than 24 women who bore children to King Henry I, only a handful are even vaguely identified, usually by a first name or a very general description, such as daughter of a knight. The vast majority are simply unnamed, existing only as the biological conduits for the king's numerous offspring. Why this pervasive in a medieval royal court? While illegitimate children were common, the identity of their mothers was often deemed less important than the identity of the father, especially for dynastic purposes. If a woman was not of high noble birth, Her name might not have been recorded in official royal documents, which focused on lineage. Furthermore, the relationships were often informal and ephemeral, unlike formal marriages, which required detailed record-keeping. Moreover, social attitudes towards women in the medieval period meant that their personal stories, especially those outside of marriage, were rarely considered worthy of detailed historical documentation. A mistress, by definition, was not a legitimate partner. Her social standing was precarious, and her story would likely not be preserved by chroniclers who chronicize the deeds of kings, queens, and noblemen. The very act of naming her might have drawn undue attention to the king's personal life or to her own family, which might have been seen as undesirable. Historians who meticulously piece together genealogies of medieval royalty often face brick walls when it comes to Henry I's mistresses. They find names like Sybil Corbett or Edith, sometimes with a vague connection to a noble family, but these are exceptions. For many others, the records are silent. We know a child was born to King Henry and an unnamed woman, but who was she? What was her life like? How did she meet the king? Was their relationship one of affection or simply convenience? Did she have other children? Where did she live after the birth of her child? These questions linger unanswered. The lives of these women are lost to time, subsumed by the grander narrative of the king and his dynasty. They are historical ghosts, crucial to the lineage of one of England's most powerful royal houses, yet utterly absent in their own right. They represent the hundreds, if not thousands, of women throughout the medieval period whose lives intersected with power and privilege, but whose stories were never deemed worthy of being told, their identities deliberately or accidentally erased from the historical record. The anonymous mothers of Henry I's children stand as a powerful reminder of how much history remains untold, hidden in the shadows of nameless figures. Number 5. Richard I's intimate male companions. Richard I, famously known as Richard the Lionheart, King of England, Duke of Normandy, and a central figure of the Third Crusade, is a titan of medieval history. His life, from his military prowess to his complex personality, has fascinated historians for centuries. Born in 1157, he was the third legitimate son of King Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful and intriguing royal couples of the age. Richard was known for his courage, his love of poetry and music, and his fierce, often rebellious spirit. Despite his fame and the extensive chronicles written about his reign, Richard's personal life, particularly his romantic and sexual relationships, remains shrouded in profound mystery and debate. He was married to Berengaria of Navarre in 1191 during the Crusade, a politically motivated union. However, their marriage produced no children, and it is widely believed to have been a distant relationship, perhaps never truly consummated. Richard spent very little time with his wife, and she never visited England during his lifetime. This lack of documented conventional romantic relationships for a king who was constantly in the public eye, often leading armies and engaging in political intrigue, has led to much speculation. Medieval chroniclers, while detailing his military campaigns and political struggles, offer remarkably little insight into his private affections. They don't mention mistresses or illegitimate children, which was unusual for a medieval monarch. However, some historical accounts, particularly those from intensely close male bonds. One of the most striking examples is from the Chronicle of Roger of Howden, a respected English historian of the time. Howden recounts an episode during the Third Crusade in 1191, where Richard I, facing grave illness, confessed his sins and took the communion, and became an Becher, and became the communion, son of King Louis of France, in order that he might beget heirs. Sharing a bed, cubicula, in the medieval period could denote a deep bond of friendship or political alliance, but for a king to do so for the explicit purpose of begetting heirs with another man, was certainly not typical and has been interpreted in various ways by historians. Another instance, also recounted by Roger of Howden, describes a moment of reconciliation between Richard and King Philip II of France, his former ally and later bitter rival. After a period of intense conflict, the two kings shared the same table and the same dish, and at night they shared the same bed in order that they might remove all suspicion of discord. Again, the sharing of a bed is noted as a sign of extreme intimacy and trust, suggesting a relationship that went beyond mere political alliance. While not explicitly romantic, these accounts paint a picture of Richard's intense emotional connections with other men, connections that were perhaps deeper than mere political convenience, and certainly not typical for a king with a queen. These accounts, combined with the absence of female companions or illegitimate children in the historical record, have fueled ongoing historical discussions about Richard's sexuality. Was he homosexual, bisexual, or was he simply uninterested in conventional romantic relationships, preferring the intense bonds of military companionship and political alliance? The language used by the chroniclers is ambiguous, leaving room for interpretation. They do not explicitly state lovers in the modern sense, but the emotional and physical proximity implied in the accounts of sharing beds is remarkable. The names of these male companions are known, e.g. Philip II of France, but the nature of their intimate relationships with Richard is the mystery. Were these merely symbolic gestures of political alliance, or did they hint at deeply personal, perhaps even romantic, connections that were suppressed or deliberately left vague in the historical record due to social taboos? Homosexuality, while present in medieval society, was condemned by the Church and often punished severely. Any explicit mention of a king engaging in such relationships would have been unthinkable for a court chronicler who would have faced severe repercussions. The enduring mystery of Richard I's intimate relationships lies in this historical silence and the tantalizing ambiguous hints. We know he had intensely close bonds, but the true nature of these connections and the precise identities of any romantic partners, male or female, remain utterly unknown. Was there a specific figure, a constant presence in his life whose identity was intentionally erased or simply never recorded out of necessity? The Lionheart remains an enigma. His personal passions as hidden as the treasures he sought on crusade, leaving historians to forever debate the loves he kept secret. Number 6. Geoffrey Rudel and the Princess of Tripoli. Geoffrey Rudel was a prominent troubadour, a composer and performer of old Occitan lyric poetry, who flourished in the mid-12th century. He came from Blaye, a lordship in Aquitaine, a region renowned for its vibrant courtly culture. Troubadours like Rudel often wrote about fin amour, or courtly love, an idealized and often unrequited form of romantic devotion. Their poetry frequently featured a revered lady, dame, who was often unattainable, married, or of a higher social standing. Rudel, however, is particularly famous and mysterious for his unique interpretation of fin amour, amour de l'homme, or love from afar. He is renowned for his poetic obsession with a distant, unseen lady whom he never met but deeply admired from across the sea. This lady was commonly referred to in his Fidas, short biographical narratives of troubadours, often compiled posthumously and somewhat fictionalized, and razos, explanations of specific poems, as the Princess of Tripoli. The legend surrounding Geoffrey Rudel and the Princess of Tripoli is one of the most romantic and tragic tales of the medieval period. According to his Vida, Rudel fell in love with the Countess of Tripoli, or Princess of Tripoli, After hearing marvelous accounts of her beauty and virtues from pilgrims returning from the Holy Land, so consumed was he by this distant love that he embarked on a perilous journey across the Mediterranean Sea to meet her. The Vida claims that he fell ill during the voyage, possibly from despair or disease, and arrived in Tripoli on his deathbed. When the princess learned of his arrival and his devotion, she rushed to his side. He died in her arms, and she, overcome with grief, arranged for his burial in the Temple Church of Tripoli, and later became a nun. This poignant story, while compelling, raises a crucial historical question. Who was this Princess of Tripoli? Crusader state of Tripoli existed in the Latin East during Rudel's lifetime. There were indeed powerful noblewomen who held the title of Countess or Princess of Tripoli. Historians have debated vigorously for centuries about her identity, proposing several candidates. Melisende of Tripoli, daughter of Count Raymond II of Tripoli. She was married to Amalric, the first king of Jerusalem, and then later was widowed. She was known for her intelligence and piety. Hodierna of Tripoli, sister of Raymond II of Tripoli, and daughter of Ponce of Tripoli. She was married to Raymond II of Antioch. A fictional creation, some scholars argue that the Princess of Tripoli was never a single real person, but rather a literary construct, a perfect embodiment of the unattainable ideal woman necessary for the amor alone concept. Problem is that none of the available historical records, including the local chronicles from Tripoli or the detailed genealogies of the Crusader, definitively link any of these women to a specific encounter with Joffre, Rudel, or to a personal romantic to meet her. The Vida itself, while offering narrative details, is a literary text that often embellishes or invents stories to explain a troubadour's poetic themes. It is difficult to separate historical fact from romantic legend. The identity of the Princess of Tripoli remains unknown because of the nature of the sources. Rudel's poems, while expressive of a deep, distant yearning, do not name her. They use metaphors and abstract references, leaving the identity deliberately vague in keeping with the conventions of courtly love poetry. The Vida, written later, provides the dramatic story, but without the corroborating evidence from independent historical chronicles or personal letters. The silence surrounding her actual identity is frustrating but also deeply intriguing. Was she a real person, a woman of the Crusader East who perhaps unknowingly became the muse for one of the greatest troubadours? Or was she a composite, an idealized vision of beauty and virtue that Rudel fashioned from travelers' tales and his own poetic imagination? The very core of the story, a troubadour's deathbed meeting with his distant, unknown love, depends on her existence, yet her specific identity is lost in the mists of medieval romanticism and historical ambiguity. The legend of Joffre, Rudel, and the Princess of Tripoli stands as a powerful testament to the allure of the unknown lover, a figure whose very anonymity only heightens the romance and tragedy of their story. She remains an enduring enigma, a symbol of the unattainable ideal that inspired profound art, whose true name and face are forever hidden behind the veil of poetry and legend. Number 7. Marie de France's Noble King and other potential inspirations for her lays. Marie de France, who flourished in the late 12th century, stands as one of the most significant and mysterious literary figures of the Middle Ages. She was arguably the first known female French poet, composing a collection of 12 narrative poems called The Lays, along with Fables, Aesopet, and St. Patrick's Purgatory. Her lays, in particular, are celebrated for their vivid storytelling, their exploration of courtly love, chivalry, and the complexities of human relationships, often tinged with sadness and magic. Despite her immense literary legacy, Marie de France herself is shrouded in almost as much mystery as the unknown lovers in her own poems. we know very little about her life. Her name, Marie, is given in the epilogue of her fables, where she states, "Marie I nomme suis de France. My name is Marie, and I am from France." This is virtually the only definitive personal detail she provides about herself. Scholars have speculated about her identity, suggesting she might have been Marie, Abbess of Shaftesbury, a natural daughter of King Stephen, or Marie, Countess of Boulogne, or another noblewoman or abbess. However, no conclusive evidence has ever emerged to definitively identify her. The mystery of her own identity extends to the question of who inspired her deeply emotional and often intensely personal poetry. In the prologue to her, Lais Marie dedicates her work to a noble king. Grant her I, she writes, "To you, noble king, to whom I owe service and love, I have begun to assemble this collection of Lais." This dedication has sparked centuries of debate among scholars. Who was this noble king? The most popular candidate is King Henry II of England, the powerful Plantagenet monarch. This theory is supported by several factors. Marie's Lais were written in Anglo-Norman French, a dialect spoken in the English court. Henry II was a known patron of arts and letters, and his court was a vibrant intellectual center. Furthermore, the themes of courtly love and chivalry explored in the Lais align perfectly with the cultural milieu of the Angevin court. If Henry II was indeed the patron, the relationship would have been one of patronage and artistic reverence. But was it more than just patronage? The language used by Marie in the dedication service and love, service et amour, has led some scholars to wonder if the connection was deeper, more personal, or even romantic. In the context of courtly love, love could have a spiritual or intellectual meaning, but it could also carry a more intimate undertone, especially when expressed by a woman to a powerful male figure. If there was a romantic connection, it would have been highly secret and dangerous, especially given Henry II's powerful personality and his turbulent marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine. Beyond this noble king, were there other figures who inspired the tales of passion, betrayal, and longing that fill her Lais? Her poems are remarkably inscrutable about the complexities of human relationships, especially those forbidden or secret. For example, in L'Envol, a knight falls in love with a mysterious fairy queen. In Chevrefoil, Tristan and Isolde meet in secret, and in Laustic, a lady's love for a knight is expressed through a nightingale's song. These stories often feature passionate clandestine affairs, suggesting a keen understanding of hidden emotions and unspoken desires. The unknown aspects of Marie de France's own life leave room for endless speculation. Was she merely observing the courtly world around her and transforming its ideals into art? Or were her poems drawing from personal experiences, from her own secret loves, or the loves of those she knew intimately, whose identities were carefully obscured? The very nature of a medieval female writer meant that her personal life, especially any romantic entanglements, would have been considered highly private, unsuitable for public record, and potentially damaging. The fact that her identity is so elusive and her dedication so tantalizingly vague means that the inspirations behind her most profound work remain a mystery. We do not know for sure if her noble king was a romantic partner, or if other unnamed individuals from her life provided the emotional depth for her exploration of love's triumphs and tragedies. Marie de France herself, the brilliant woman behind the timeless Lais, leaves us with a pervasive sense of the unknown, asking us to wonder about the hidden lives and hidden loves that shaped her extraordinary literary vision.